So Jake and I are kind of doing a double act, because obviously we've been working very closely with the Energy Network in exploring this project and how Bristol can maintain momentum, or the Bristol community groups can maintain momentum in energy. And I was going to start very briefly just by talking about Bristol itself and the sort of distinguishing features in terms of energy. Those of you who were down on College Green got some sort of sense of activity around energy in Bristol at a range of different scales. And there are some particular features. So as Bronwyn already mentioned, there's a load of different energy groups in Bristol spread across different areas of the city. And there are a huge range of different approaches to addressing energy, if you like. Jake will talk more about that when he talks about the Energy Network, which is there to connect the groups and share knowledge and experience. The Centre for Sustainable Energy is also based in Bristol, and that's a non-profit organisation set up to explore energy issues and help communities and individuals be more sustainable in energy. Bronwyn mentioned the local energy assessment fund bids, and we think that the number of successful projects in Bristol was the same as the number in London, and obviously London's a lot bigger than Bristol, so Bristol is something right in getting all that money in from the government for the local energy assessment fund. Also in Bristol, the City Council is quite active. It had a DECC-funded project trialling some Green Deal type actions, the Bristol Home Energy Upgrade, which was £2 million into Bristol to look at how the Green Deal might work in the future. It's also got some European funding. It's called the BRIGHT project, Bristol Retrofitting Innovative Technologies for Everyone, although I haven't heard that term used very much by the council. And that's another couple of £1 million, but it's set up to generate investment. So the money is to set up structures rather than just to spend on particular technologies, if you like. And also, of course, the Green Deal launched last year, Green Deal and Eco. And so that's, if you like, a pivotal moment in government policy trying to engage communities and address energy efficiency in a different way. Whoops, wrong direction, sorry. Right, so if, Jake, you want to talk about the Energy Network next?
Yes, so Caroline's invited me to say a few words for everyone that doesn't know about the network. Obviously, some of you will have been down the hill earlier on this morning, and others of you will be very familiar with the network already, but maybe it's a good recap anyway. So yeah, my name's Jake. I've been working with the network for the last 2.5, 3 years. Caroline was emphasising that I should try and distill something of my role into the programme, and I ended up writing de facto coordinator over the last year. But really, it's, as I'll explain, it's about everyone coming together. So, the Bristol Energy Network had its first meeting in October 2010, and its aim was to bring together people throughout the city, individuals, groups, organisations that were already working on sustainable energy issues. So that meeting was focused around 3-ish questions: who you are, what you're currently doing, and what you can share with others. Obviously, there's always a few precursors to that, an actual initiative or something being launched. And that broadly came from a few groups coming together and realising that there were other people doing similar things. And so one or a few individuals from these meetings set off to create an open platform. And very quickly, it's kind of spiraled into something regular. It doesn't quite know what it is or where it's going, but it has been very useful as well. So I've just listed a few of the next few meetings, just there. And on the right, although you can't really see it at all, is a list of the people that presented at the first meeting. So over the next few years, we've kind of developed a few more substantiated aims and objectives. The network is broadly an umbrella organisation for all the community groups in the local area and sort of surrounding Bristol as well. It aims to promote the diverse activities of the groups. And it does that through providing an open platform, cascading news and information and policy updates, and acting as a conduit between the groups, but also slowly becoming more between external organisations as well. So over the 3-ish years, we've done this through 3 main ways. The main one has been open meetings. So regular open meetings, hopefully, or roughly every 2 months. It's an opportunity for people to get together, share their ideas, normally around a theme or a topic, so we can go into something in more detail. But most importantly, socialise, get to know each other's faces, things like that. Then we've also been holding events around the city, not events as such. We've had an event stall, which we take to various places. And that's about promoting the network and the groups to wider audiences. And also encouraging more people to come along to the meetings, encouraging people to start their own initiatives. So creating a supportive atmosphere. And finally, through our website. It's designed as an open platform for people to post news, resources, and updates from various people. So, the question that I would always like to tackle in something like this is, well, what have we achieved? Yeah. Is it tangible? Is it measurable? And you can probably get, oh no, I was going to say a bit about the groups. Okay, the groups first. This is a map, it's a Google map produced by CSC, detailed the groups that were in Bristol in 2011. More have generated, some have not collapsed but aren't as active as they were before. I've just listed them on the outside. It's from, can you see that very well? It doesn't look like there's a high concentration, but there's a few clusters where in actual fact many of these represent a few initiatives in one place or are claiming to have their base there, when really it might be more spread out than that. The other point I wanted to say about this is it's supposed to be Bristol and the wider area. If we were to look at the council authority, or what it looks at, we've actually got a reasonable coverage of groups. But if we look at the wider actual city boundaries, then we're lacking in many areas. And that's because Bristol actually spreads out into North Gloucestershire, South Gloucestershire, North Somerset, and Bath and North East Somerset. Yes, so what have we achieved? Some of it, lots of this, note-taking, scribbling, but within that, that's also the sharing of ideas and bringing people together. So that's quantifiable, but really it's the bits behind it that count. And then I also wanted to tease out a few of the more tangible things as well, or maybe tangible to less tangible as we go through. It's been used as a launch platform, and here I'm using Bristol Energy Co-op as an example. Amelia's moved, actually, to spread news and launch new initiatives. It's been used for the expansion of groups as well. So this closely ties into LEAF. But Demand Energy Equality is a group that runs DIY solar panel workshops, and they target them at low-income groups, households. It started up in 2011, but had slow beginning, slow rumblings, and when LEAF came along, the network was able to help facilitate Demand Energy Equality, not doing its own bid because it didn't quite fit, but linking up with lots of other groups. And so Dan, who's the originator or coordinator for this, has explicitly mentioned a few times that that was only possible because he had the knowledge of people and that people knew him, they knew his face. So within the short 2-week window of getting in an application, Dan could say, hi guys, I can offer this to you as well. It'll make your bid stronger and we're more likely to succeed. So that's a tangible thing. Then also within LEAF, one of the final criteria for getting the funding was being open and willing to share knowledge. And because the network was already here, nearly all the groups could just say, yes, we're going to do that. We were going to do that anyway. And they have a vehicle by which to share their learning. Then finally, so you've probably all heard that Bristol's won Green Capital for European Green Capital till 2015. So this is also, the network's been promoted within that bid, and what that really means is that it's the local groups being promoted themselves. But we had an explicit mention within the jury report for European Green Capital 2014, and an almost mention this year with Bristol is leading the way with bottom-up community-based initiatives, which I think we should all be a little bit proud of. I think that's it for me for the time being, but I'm going to come back in a minute and elaborate a little bit on where the strategy has come from, and hopefully give you a few more details.
Yep.
Caroline.
Thanks, Jake. Okay, so that gives you a bit of context and explains what the Bristol Energy Network is about, where it came from, and how it's evolved and where it's got to at the moment. So what do we mean by maintaining momentum? What we meant, as Bronwyn's already said, is how do you maintain momentum in groups as a network into the future to keep some sort of constant level of activity going rather than these sort of bursts of activity which come, tire people out and then die away again. And we were also interested in exploring the relationship between regulations at the top and activism at the bottom. As Bronwyn mentioned earlier on, the government consultation on community energy in a way looks at how community groups can help to deliver government regulation, government policy. But is that really what they're about, or is it really about activism, people doing stuff on the ground, doing it in their own ways, and maybe actually seeking to change the regulation at the top, to change policy? And what happens in the middle? Is there something in the middle? Is that what Bristol Energy Network is about? Does it have a role in supporting the community groups, translating some of those common messages that are coming out of the way that community groups operate into something that government can understand? And if that is its role, how does it do that? Alternatively, is there another role this is government policy, well, what does that make sense? How do you make sense of it? How do you translate that down into action on the ground? So, as Bronwyn said, we had a small grant to explore those kinds of ideas and to work with Ben and the community groups. So, what did we do? Well, first we thought about the Green Deal because it was this new government policy, it was this new idea about energy efficiency. And was there a role for community groups in the Green Deal? Where did they fit? So an initial bit of research was just looking at what sort of roles community groups might have. And we worked with the Centre for Sustainable Energy in exploring that. And actually, we produced an initial publication which we shared with the community groups at the September Bristol Energy Forum. And then CSE got some money from DECC to explore that idea further, and that's one of their planned local resources that's now available from CSE. We also surveyed all the local groups to get some idea of what they're about. We looked at the LEAF reports, because each group fed back to government quite a detailed LEAF report on how their projects are gone and the issues with them. We looked at some other sort of analogies. We explored what about housing, what about secondary co-ops and primary co-ops, what happened in the 70s, how did that flourish, did that have any relevance to energy now? And then we explored everything we were doing. We took to the open Ben meetings and shared some of the findings and asked for ideas and feedback and to see what they thought of what we were doing. So first the surveys. We sent the survey out to all the Bristol groups and to key contacts. So it wasn't just a random response from somebody who might not really represent the group. We tried to find the right people that could speak for the group as a whole. And we did that partly through the main LEAF contacts in the groups as well. And we asked them about their current activity, what they were doing at the moment, what their ambitions were for the future, and also specifically about the LEAF grants and where they felt that had got them to and where it's going to take them to in the future. And this is a little pie chart showing what types of groups we had and the types of groups we surveyed. So actually less than half were looking specifically at energy. Half were thinking about wider sustainability and environmental issues. And a couple, including one specifically, wasn't thinking about energy at all, but got a LEAF grant to look at renewable technologies. So some particular things that came out of our exploration of the LEAF projects. One big issue was a short time scale. And in fact, if I can find the quote, at a subsequent Ben meeting, the LEAF funding was referred to as a cruel experiment by DECC, which fundamentally misunderstood how voluntary groups operate. and how to make the work better, and how to make it work better with limited volunteer resources. And I think that's a fair reflection, actually, because it was a really, really tight timescale. The grant offer came out before Christmas. They want the bids back in after Christmas. They wanted the work completed by the end of March. And that's a big ask for community groups. But as we've heard, the Centre for Sustainable Energy stepped in, along with Ben, to try and facilitate a better response to that call. And it was quite apparent that that intermediary support was really essential in getting the successful bids and getting the work done. And we've reflected on that in different ways through the project. Where do the intermediaries come in? What can they do? How do you bring together some shared learning, but also some sort of shared resources that people can use without having to reinvent the wheel, each group doing things in a slightly different way. So I'll reflect on that later. But also, LEAF wasn't all bad. There was some good data coming out of it, which would form the backbone of new work and new projects. But some groups did say it exhausted them. That was a really hard, tough few months. And after that, people were just like, oh, I can't do any more. I've got to get back to my family, to my job, to everything else. And again, that was sort of where the idea of maintaining momentum came from and how we take that forwards. So LEAF did produce some useful data and some issues around different income groups and the different issues that affect different groups in the population. And the idea of new networks as well, actually having the time to link with different organisations, like housing associations, for example, which maybe energy groups weren't thinking about before, and other community bodies, and to start to think about the idea of fuel poverty and how local groups might address that. And it certainly engaged people. It sort of showed that community groups based in the community can engage people well and generate some enthusiasm for learning and enthusiasm for change, and really sort of raise awareness. So briefly, I mentioned this idea of housing co-ops earlier on, and that came from some work that Morag had done previously, looking at housing and how housing co-ops had operated. I think particularly in the 70s, there was this idea of primary housing co-ops being the ones that manage the housing on the ground, and then something about secondary co-ops linking and connecting them together and providing some support for those primary groups. And it was sort of apparent that the primary groups functioned much better when there was some sort of secondary support. And it was interesting to explore how this secondary support might exist within energy and within the Bristol context. So those are some ideas of the types of support that the secondary co-ops provided. And we asked within our survey what sort of support the community groups might find useful, as maybe a pointer to the sorts of directions and the sorts of things that Ben could aspire to do in the future. As I said, we did try to work very closely with Ben and share the things that were coming out of the project as we went along. So starting with a picture at the top at the September Community Energy Forum, we took the initial findings talking about the Green Deal to that, and shared them and asked for ideas and the sorts of barriers that community groups felt they would face in trying to take some of those ideas forward. The bottom picture, you probably recognise the room. It's me standing there talking again to another Ben meeting, this time in January, about some of the initial findings from the project. And that was a very interactive session as well and very well attended. And we've also taken some of the work that we've been doing into the way that the community energy strategy has started to develop. So basically every 2 months or so we were working with the energy groups and talking to Ben people in between times as well. And one of the Ben meetings, we thought it would be interesting to try and map the links, how the different Bristol energy groups and the other related areas of Bristol might map together, and if they linked, and how they linked, and whether they should link, and whether links didn't exist where they should. And although we can't show all the links, what we ended up with was people working in small sort of groups of 4 to 5 and drawing lines on a diagram, and I've tried to distill some of that into this diagram here. And there were some particular things that came out of that we thought were worth registering, particularly that local community energy groups on the whole don't link with business. They particularly don't link with big business. It didn't really link with the enterprise partnership. Whether there was a need to try and change that so that there was a more collective perspective on communities. They also, in some cases, didn't link particularly well with other local groups. And other local groups obviously represent different types of issues, but they reach different audiences as well. So maybe there's an argument for trying to link different types of local groups together. And also housing and landlords. Obviously housing is a big issue. Sustainable housing, making houses more energy efficient, is one of the things that the local groups are aiming for. And although they might link with individuals, housing associations and landlords are a kind of missing link in that chain that is worth teasing out too. And you'll see the two big red arrows there. That's the big energy companies and how they link with local households and with financial and legal services in a way that the local groups don't so much. The big energy companies have a really big advantage in being able to talk to every single household that they supply, and they can get whatever message they choose across to those households in a way that the local community groups find it much harder to do. So then we started to think about the opportunities for community groups and brokers. I put it in inverted commas there because we're not sure if broker was the right word. Maybe it's intermediaries. But anyway, I'm using the term broker to refer to organisations like the Energy Network and the Centre for Sustainable Energy, and arguably actually the university as well, in a position between community groups or community activism at one extreme and the sort of regulatory stuff at the top. And the sort of role in identifying opportunities and using their understanding of what matters on the ground and what's important locally to try and identify the opportunities between the government regulatory stuff at the top and people on the ground. And also how those groups work with the local communities to provide support and promote action on new initiatives. So there are particular opportunities and roles, if you like, there. And those bottom three, again, are kind of reflecting the stuff that came out of the housing analogy I referred to earlier on. But there are particular challenges for community groups, especially, and brokers. And the big one, the one that was number one in our survey, was we need more resources. The volunteer base is brilliant. It's what makes community groups work, and it's what embeds them in the community. But it means they don't have a huge body of resource to do big projects. And funding, this bursts of funding, odd grants coming now and again, make it really hard to plan ahead to do coordinated action at a local level. And there's always new information coming out and new initiatives and new experiences. How do you find out what's happening out there, and how do you share it, and how do you learn from it? And there is a particular role, the Centre for Sustainable Energy has done a lot of that, trying to provide good information to local groups. And the Energy Network too does some of that. Morag's been nagging me that I'm running out of time, so I'll try and speed up a bit. The second most important thing that the respondents to the survey said that they wanted that would make them more effective and to achieve more in the future was coordination of activities. And that might be to do with networking, sharing of information, but it might also be more than that, finding ways of working together to achieve more, to share resources. And obviously the low levels of energy awareness in the population and understanding of what the barriers are to action are significant too. So, what's the answer? Well, maybe it's that.
Maybe.
Jake, I'm really sorry, I've kind of squashed your time a bit. So.
How much time have we got left? None? Okay.
Well,
so 2 minutes? Yeah? Okay. So very, very quickly, I was going to run through who was at the strategy launch this morning? And that's most of us. Yeah. I found it a little bit confusing, and I've been involved right from the start. So I'm going to very quickly, run through how we got there. It was stimulated, in my eyes, by the election of our first mayor and the chance to galvanise on this opportunity for more creativity and action on the grounds. George's was almost elected on a platform of experimentation in moving forwards. The second thing that really stands out to me is the arrival of the Green Deal and its complexity. Some of the groups, such as Iris, who was presenting this morning, was looking to get involved in the Green Deal, but was realising that it was going to be quite hard by itself. So more collaboration and coordination was needed. We wrote a very quick proposal at the end of last year, over the Christmas period, and that set out a very quick vision, a rationale, and some benefits of why it would be useful to have a strategy. But I won't dwell on that for time. So the process, I think, is extremely important to Ben as what it stands for, but also in developing something meaningful. So we tried to make it as open as possible. We held 3 open workshops from March through to May, so notice the very quick timeframes as well. It was written collectively, so the use of an online wiki and a couple of collective writing sessions. That didn't work quite as effectively as we might have hoped, but there was certainly a fair amount of participation and contributing from lots of different sectors of the cities, from individuals and organisations. The outcome is a document. It's something we can take hold of. It's been endorsed almost launched by the Mayor. He was meant to be doing that this morning, but the actual words didn't quite come out of his mouth. For people of Bristol, you probably understand why George is a tricky character. So I'd highlight there, process more important than the outcome. It felt like it should be at the time, but we'll just have to wait and see what this strategy actually does in the future to say whether the outcome's more important. Bronwyn has already said something about the strategy. We've heard the vision that Iris read out this morning, the strapline, putting communities at the heart of Bristol's energy system. This wheel pie, I think it was originally called an onion, has there's 5 core themes for the strategy. They're all in the middle. Then in the next ring is the broad goals, and the idea was to then branch out with the next layer of the onion or pie, so that you'd have some pathways, steps, stakeholders, actions that just spread out from each sector of the onion or pie. It's available to download online at the Bristol Energy Network site, strategy. The last thing to say is that although it has been a lot of work, there's been a lot of great communication and collaboration in bringing this together, I should also mention the university, CSC, and the City Council that all played a role in not just contributing, but actually bringing it together as well. So thank you, everyone. Yes, in Gus Hoyt's endorsement to the strategy, he quite aptly points out that the hard work starts now. Of course. So our next steps are to create or turn this into a living document, put it back up online, so it's continually evolving. We are planning to hold some more focused pathway meetings, or what do we actually do with this now? What are the steps we're going to take in the autumn? And I think that's it.
Yeah, I think that probably
Yeah, I think that probably better be it. Thank you.